I am CA Sudhani. I am continuing with the chapter of consignment, part of your paper number 1, Principles and Practice of Accounting. In this part, we will touch upon the topic of valuation of consignment stock. So before understanding how to value the consignment stock, we will have to understand various expenses that are incurred at various stages. What expenses can be incurred at various stages of consignment? Let's see each of them one by one. Firstly, when the consigner consigns the goods from his place, at that particular time, he has to incur himself certain expenses. What kind of expenses? Like he may have to incur the expense of loading. Loading means loading the goods in a carriage. Secondly, the money that have to be paid as freight for transportation of goods from the place of consigner to place of consignee. This all depends upon the agreement. Sometimes it may happen that the freight has to be paid by consigner, or sometimes as per the agreement it may have to be paid by the consignee. Okay. Thirdly, it may be possible that the insurance in transit has been done by the consigner. In that case, that insurance premium will also be an expense incurred by consigner. And likewise, many expenses may be incurred by the consigner. Now, when the goods have reached to the consignee's place, the expenses begin on the part of consignee. What expenses may be incurred by consignee? Let us see. Firstly, when the goods reach at consignee's place, he may have to unload the goods, and for unloading he may have to pay certain charges. Secondly, might be possible that consignee gets the goods from out of the country. That means he imports the goods. In that case, for importation, he may have to pay the customs duty, that is the import duty. This is also an expense which is incurred by the consignee. Next, what other expenses? Carriage inwards, maybe from the place of, suppose he is receiving the goods from out of India and the goods have reached the port or airport. From the port or airport, he will have to bring the goods to his place, that is to his factory or any other place. So the transportation expenses, the carriage expenses incurred in the process of bringing the goods, that is also an expense on the part of consignee. Likewise, many other expenses may also be incurred by him. Friends, one thing you must have noticed, that these expenses that I am telling are other than the expense on goods. We know that consignee has taken the goods, and for that he will have to pay the amount to the consigner at the end. But the amount that he has to pay to the consigner, that is not considered here. I'm talking about other expenses that he have to incur out of his own pocket. As you have noticed, that consignee need not pay the amount to the consigner out of his pocket. We know that consignee once makes the sales, and after making the sales, whatever he receives from that receipt, he has to pay off to the consigner. He need not pay it beforehand. Beforehand also, he has to pay the advance money, that is something different. But the ultimate settlement has to be done only after he receives the amount himself from the customers. Okay. So what is the next kind of expense, next stage of expense? Let us see. The next kind of expense is when the goods are lying at the place of consignee. Suppose the goods are lying in the factory or at the godown of consignee. Then while they are lying, some expenses may have incurred during that period. Say, the rent of godown where the goods are lying. Secondly, the insurance of the stock, the insurance of the goods while they are lying in the godown. Thirdly, any other office and administration expenses, like the salary of the manager, like electricity expenses, telephone expenses, etc. Okay. And the last stage of expense is when the consignee sells those goods to the ultimate customers. and such expenses we can call them selling and distribution expenses. For example, the expenses related to marketing, expenses related to advertisement, and many other expenses can be incurred at the stage of sales. So these are variety of expenses. Now, one thing we have to notice is that I have told you three category of expenses from consignee's point of view. As you can see here, three variety of expenses. The first variety that I have told you can be called non-recurring expenses. Non-recurring expenses. Because these expenses are incurred only for once. Only when the goods are firstly received. Not again and again. These expenses are not incurred on recurrent basis. Okay. But the second and third category of expenses are called the recurring expenses. These are the recurring expenses because these expenses have to be repeatedly incurred. They are not the expenses incurred once. No, they have to be incurred repeatedly. Whenever the goods will be sold, till the period the goods are kept in the godown, every time these expenses will have to be incurred, right? So these are recurring expenses. Okay, so we have studied what are the various kind of expenses. Now, why I have told you expenses at these various stages? So we'll make their use in the next part. Let us see what is the next part. Very, very important topic. The main topic, valuation of consignment stock. How the consignment stock is valued. So let us say the period for which agreement has been made, the period comes to an end. Let us say the financial year comes to an end and it is 31st of March. Now on 31st of March, we look into the godown of consignee and we see that a lot of stock is lying into his godown. So now what we have to do is to make valuation of that stock. The principle of valuation is the cost price of stock or the net realizable value of stock, whichever is less. Now, if you have already studied the chapter of inventories, that is the chapter which is particularly related to stock, then in that chapter you must have noticed that inventories, that is stock, are always valued on this basis. What basis? The cost price of that inventory and the net realizable value of that inventory, whichever is less. Okay, so why is this the basis? I'm not going to tell you this right now. You can, for that you can refer the inventories chapter. In that it will be very much clear to you. But right now what I'm going to tell you is what all will be included in the cost price of consignment stock. And then I'll tell that what all will be included in the net realizable value. So let us understand one by one. Cost price means what? Cost price of consignment stock will include what? It will include two things. Which things will it include? First is the purchase price. Now obviously the consignee must have purchased the goods at some or the other price. What is the purchase price here? Purchase price may be the cost price, right? Or it may be the invoice price. As you remember that sometimes the goods are sent to the consignee at invoice price, and in that case we make valuation at invoice price only. So as the case may be, the purchase price will either be the cost price or it will be the invoice price. Okay. The second component of the cost is expenses that have been incurred till the goods reach consignee's premises. So, till the goods reach consignee's premises, what expenses can be incurred? Let us take into account. Let us take into calculation. Let us count all expenses which are incurred till the goods reach consignee's premises. As we can see that first of all, this is the expense which is incurred before the goods reach consignee's place. Secondly, this is the expense which is incurred. So we can say two kind of expenses are incurred. First expense is what? First expense is all the consignor's expenses. All the consignor's expenses, right? Secondly, can I write all the consignee's expenses? Just tell me. No, not all the consignee's expenses. I will say consignee's expenses only which ones? Non-recurring ones. Only non-recurring ones. Am I right in saying this? Yes. We have to take only non-recurring expenses because the recurring expenses are incurred after the goods have been received by the consignee. Okay. So these two expenses are taken in the second point. Along with that, first point has to be taken. So these all items are added and then we reach to the cost price. After we reach the cost price, we compare the cost price with the net realizable value. We compare it with the net realizable value. What is the net realizable value? Realizable value means the value which we think can be realized. That means the value which we can get by selling the stock right now. Okay, so what is the net realizable value? The expected value at which we can sell this stock right now. That means the expected selling price. Now suppose I think that I expect that my stock can be sold at rupees 200 per unit. Okay, but in selling that stock, I will have to incur certain expenses, which are called the selling expenses. Let us assume that I'll have to incur rupees 50 as selling expense. So what is the net realizable value? Net realizable value will be 200 minus 50, that is rupees 150 per unit. Is it right? So what we have to do is that we have to compare the cost price with this rupees 150 per unit net realizable value. And out of them, whichever is less will be taken as the consignment stock. Okay. One thing, let me clarify that many a times you will see that question is not giving us the net realizable value. In that case, we'll just consider cost price and we'll calculate the cost price, and that itself will be the value of consignment stock. We need not bother about the net realizable value if it is not given. Okay. So now let us do a question so that we understand this concept. In this situation, X consigns, let us understand the question first of all. X consigns 500 units to Y, costing rupees 400 per unit. Okay, so the goods are costing rupees 400, but they are consigned at the cost price itself. That means not at the invoice price. So let me show you out here. This is X and this is Y, and X consigns 500 units, which costs him rupees 400 per unit, and he consigns them at the cost itself. That means at rupees 400 per unit itself. Right. Okay, let's move forward. Out of the units consigned, 300 units are sold by Y. So what Y does is, he sells 300 units at rupees 600 each. So the selling price is rupees 600 per unit. Okay, in the whole process, the expenses have been incurred by consignor amounting to rupees 4,000. So 4,000 rupees is the expense incurred by consignor, and the consignee, that is Y, incurs in his godown a rent of rupees 1,000. So this is the godown rent of rupees 1,000 incurred by Y. And selling expenses of rupees 2000. Both these expenses are incurred by Y, and 4000 is the expense incurred by X. We have to calculate the value of unsold stock. Okay, so let us proceed. As I'd already told you, we have to keep in view 2 points. The first point will be the cost of stock, and second will be the net realizable value. Has the question given any indication of net realizable value? No. So we'll ignore it. We'll just focus on the cost of stock. Now, cost of stock is composed of two parts. What all are included in it? Let me write it in statement form rather than in chart form. So what all are included in cost of stock? First of all, purchase price. What is the purchase price in this case? What is the purchase price? The cost price. If it would have been the invoice price, then invoice price would have been taken. But right now we have to take purchase prices 500 units multiplied by rupees 400 per unit. Right? That means rupees 2 lakh is the purchase price. On purchase price, we have to add certain expenses. What expenses? One is consignor's expenses. That means X's expenses of rupees 4000. And secondly, consignee's non-recurring expense. What non-recurring expense have been given to us? Is any non-recurring expense given to us? Tell me, just tell me. No. Both these expenses incurred by Y are of recurring nature because they have been incurred after the goods have been brought to the premises of Y. So our list comes to an end, and the total cost of stock comes out to rupees 2 lakh and 4,000. 2 lakh 4,000. Okay. This is the value of consignment stock. This is the total value of goods consigned, in fact. This is what? This is the total cost of goods consigned, right? Okay. Now tell me that this total cost of rupees 2 lakh 4,000, for how many units is this cost related to? We will say that this cost is related to 500 units because we have taken the expenses related to all 500 units. So this is related to 500 units. Now if we divide 500, what we'll get? Let's calculate. 2 lakh 4,000 divided by 500, we'll get rupees 408. Right? This is the cost per unit. And this cost per unit will be multiplied by the units of stock. So how many units of stock are there? So value of stock is units of stock. How many units are remaining with us? See friends, 500 units had been sent, 300 units have been sold. How many units are left? Only 200 units are left. So the value of stock will be 200 units multiplied by rupees 408. So what is the answer? It is rupees 81,600. Okay. Friends, if I change in this question one particular thing, you tell me what will be the change in the answer. The change that I am going to do is that let this 1000 be the amount which is related to freight. Let us say this is the expense related to freight. It is not related to go down rent. What change would have been made? We will say that in that case, rupees 1000 would have become a non-recurring expense. Now it is not a recurring expense. This is a non-recurring expense. And in that situation, what will happen? Tell me. In that situation, the only change will be that consignee's non-recurring expense of rupees 1000 would also have been added, and the total value would have been 2 lakh 2,05,000. And if we write here 2,05,000, what would have been the amount per unit? It would have been rupees, if you calculate, 410. And in that case, this value of stock would have been rupees 82,000. Okay, this would only have been the change in that case. So this is the situation in which the stock was consigned at stock. Now, next we will take a situation in which the stock is consigned at the invoice price. But that we'll do in the next part. For the time being, thank you very much.